Okay, let's go on to persistence and change in Afro-Eurasian cultural traditions. So we have persistence and change in the Afro-Asian cultural traditions. So what we're going to see is we're going to see several different things. We're going to see a renewal in the Islamic world. We're going to see China having new directions in an old tradition. And then we're going to see India trying to bridge that Hindu-Muslim divide. So when we look at Africa, so let's look at what we do know. We know in Africa that they didn't just convert. As the same like in Native America, a lot of times you don't see that huge major conversion and you don't see the complete abandonment of their own personal culture. We saw that in the Native Americans. We're also going to see that in Africa. They don't totally give up their own personal traditions. What they do is they take their pagan, non-biblical worldview. They're going to add some of the biblical worldview and come up with a whole new belief. So they're going to come up with this whole new syncretism where they take their own traditions and new Christian traditions and kind of mix them together. And so this is what you see in Africa. You see the African voodoo because of that. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at expansion and renewal in the Islamic world. So in Islam, we know that they go through changes just much like Christianity. In Islam, they are going to spread their ideas through Sufis, through scholars, through trade. They do not spread through conquest, unlike Christianity. Sufis were kind of like mystical people that danced and were very spiritual. They made Islam a very spiritual experience. And so what's going to happen is let's look at the events of Islam. So we start off, and early on, literacy in the Arabic world is going to be offered. There's going to be informal schools, women held political power, and they ruled in the area. Remember, early on, Islam, there was equality in men with men and women. Then you have Akbar came in. Akbar was part of the Mughal Empire, and he is going to come in. There's going to be some religious syncretism. Some people find it even offensive, maybe even heretical, like where it's, wow, this is super against our traditions. This is super against Islam. And so toward the end of the Mughal Empire, so you've got all of this during the Orthodox Muslims. They thought it was kind of heretical what the early Mughal Empire with Akbar, where he was like, yeah, totally. We're going to give people rights. We're going to actually be more accommodating to the Hindus, maybe blend a little bit. He was super cool and super chill with all of this. And then Aurangzeb comes in and he's like, yeah, no. You're going to see this resistance spring up against policies that were accommodating to the Hindus. Remember, Aurangzeb is the one who instituted Sharia law. That's where the women wear the face coverings. They're not allowed to be out in public without a man. They weren't allowed to drive. It really took women's rights away. So what you're going to do is you are going to see, because of that, Abd al-Wahhab is going to start the Wahhabi movement. This is going to be an Islamic renewal movement, because remember, the basic tenets of Islam are pretty peaceful and very much on equality, unlike other religions. He is going to argue that deviation from pure Islamic faith is what is going to bring down the Ottoman Empire, that they're going to become weak because they weren't following true Islamic faith. So now what you're going to have is you're going to have what is called, let me pull that back out. Oops, not that. Sorry. So now we're going to have what is Wahhabi Islam. They're going to be against idolatry, no veneration of Sufis in their tombs. Muhammad ibn Saud, he's going to be the founder of Saudi Arabia, and he is going to support this religious movement. Now, Saudi Arabia is definitely not known for giving women rights, but under him, he was a lot more into giving women back some of their rights, giving them back some of their power, giving them power over dowries, divorce, consent, face coverings, business. So he's going to kind of try and come back and get some of those rights back for women. We know today that in Saudi Arabia and in the Middle East, that rights for women under Islam have kind of gone back and forth. Hasn't ever been brought back to the original tenets of Islam. So what's going on in China? In China, what we have is we have some new directions in an old tradition, and the old tradition is Confucianism. So the Ming and Qing are going to primarily operate under Confucian principles, which is interesting because that is less under religion and more under a school of thought. So they're going to take Confucianism and kind of incorporate Buddhism and Taoism to create this like neo Confucianism, which is going to probably help open up eyes to learning. And we're going to see something that is a little bit more like the Enlightenment and scientific revolution in Europe. This is basically what we're going to end up seeing in China under a different idea. Um, what that's going to be called is it's going to be called Kaozhang. Kaozhang. It is literally research based on evidence. So with Francis Bacon and Rene Descartes, they're the ones who came up with the scientific theory, scientific method, which is very similar to this. This is going to be a Chinese intellectual movement whose practitioners emphasize the importance of evidence and analysis. Again, scientific revolution. Kind of seeing all that blend together here. Very similar, very equal to that. This is going to be applied especially to historical documents, though. They're going to look back at Greek texts, early Islamic texts, and kind of start using that for rationalization. So what you're going to do is you're going to see writing, because anytime you start focusing on research-based evidence, you see people start to focus on writing and information. So Chao Qian, probably butchered that name, wrote The Dream of the Red Chamber. So this is about the rise and fall of the Chinese civilization. It has like a magic stone. It's kind of like mystical. It's about a noble family's fall from grace. It's about the wrongdoings of patriarchy and how that brings down the Chinese family. So kind of very powerful, but that's kind of what that whole thing is about. And then you also have a writer who is super influential. Consider him to be like a Voltaire or an Aristotle or a Socrates, somebody who is a big thinker who really thinks outside of the box. And his name is Wang Ming. He says to know and not act is not to know. So he's going to be an influential thinker who is very big on introspection. People can find their own path. Think about, I can create my own path. I have to find it within myself. So he was very big on that. And so again, this is going to be a very big parallel. Kaozheng is going to be a parallel to the Enlightenment thinkers, scientific revolution. All of that is going to be very similar in China to what you see in Europe. Now on to India. So in India, we know that the Hindus and the Muslims kind of have this fighting, and Akbar is going to try really hard to be tolerant and incorporate art from Christianity. And so what's going to end up happening is you're going to see a whole new movement called the Bhakti Movement. And that is where they tried to blend and become more tolerant. And that was going on around that time. Okay. So what we have, so the Bhakti movement is basically, it is yoga and meditation and knowledge and devotion to the arts and rituals. Caste distinctions are going to be kind of ignored. So how do you think that this could blur the lines between religions? I'm going to let you pause and think about that. So one way that this is going to definitely blur those lines between religions is we know that Hindus, being part of the caste system, really tells you where your life is. And people are a lot more welcoming to religion and to ideas when they're not being oppressed, as a sense. So what's going to happen is we are going to have a whole new religion called Sikhism that is going to be founded. Guru Nanak is going to be the founder of Sikhism. He is disputing with 4 kneeling Hindu holy men. So he's having this whole conversation with them. Sikh ethics emphasize the congruence between spiritual development and everyday moral conduct. So it is definitely about being a good human being. Gurus are what they're preachers are called, I guess. So he is a guru, and he is Guru Nanak. And so to him, this is going to summarize this perspective as truth is the highest virtue, but higher still is truthful living. So being a good person. And he very much believed in the equality of men and women. That is going to be upheld to the highest. Equality is going to be a big, big, big deal. So here's an inspiring story. And this is Bhakti. This is going to be the story about Bhakti. Okay. And that is the end of section 2.